Whether it's recasting roles, reshooting scenes, or rewriting scripts, Hollywood is awash with tales of films being fine-tuned at the 11th hour to meet the expectations of audiences or simply appease the whim of a power-mad producer. It's why my role in The Transporter was cut and I tragically was replaced by Jason Statham. It's not my fault that the minibars and hotels don't have fucking locks on them. For movies totally up the creek without the proverbial paddle, it can prove a blessing. Yet that's not the case here, as what we detail today are misshapen monsters manhandled by meddling. With this in mind, I'm Jules from WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 movies ruined by last-minute changes. Number 8, Exorcist: The Beginning. In the original Exorcist films, it was made plain that this wasn't the first time that Father Lancaster Merrin had exorcised the demon Pazuzu. Exorcist: The Beginning was supposed to regale that first encounter. Paul Schrader was hired to direct the flick, but chose to go in a new route with the franchise, turning it into a psychological film as opposed to a horror. Producers Morgan Creek were frustrated with the outcome, having expected something far more gratuitous in its violence, so they gave Schrader the boot and quickly drafted in Rennie Harlin. Big mistake. The new director's efforts were slaughtered by critics, and a chastened Morgan Creek were forced to give Schrader $35,000 to finish the film properly in hopes of some DVD recuperation. The result, retitled Dominion, the prequel to The Exorcist, was a much more coherent affair, described by Exorcist screenwriter William Blatty as classy. The Beginning, on the other hand, he described as the most humiliating experience in his professional life. Ouch. Number 7, Payback. Payback was a 1999 film starring Mel Gibson as Porter, a career criminal who is betrayed by his partner and wife. Oh no. The couple leave him for dead, making off with his money, but wouldn't you just know it, and the title's a bit of a giveaway, he survives and seeks revenge. I should have said payback. I could have said payback there. Producers weren't bothered by how cliché the film was, but were concerned that the original treatment of Porter was unlikable. The studios had penned him for a huge franchise, and it wasn't going to help if the audience hate him, so they reshot 30% of the movie and even took out the ambiguous ending in which Porter might have died. They also managed to take out most of the violence, which unsurprisingly harmed their attempts at an action franchise, seeing as it had far less action in it than before. Now, the butchering of the butchering isn't actually terrible, but it's a far cry from the original iteration. Number 6, I Am Legend. The entire point of I Am Legend is supposed to be that virologist Robert Neville is hunting and killing what are basically vampires mutated by a cancer air quotes cure, and has essentially become no different to the monsters that he's trying to wipe out. Effectively, there are no heroes or villains in this new world, and his adversaries' motivations are as justified as his own. Unfortunately, test audiences hated the ending, so the studio executives decided to change it to feature butterflies, mindless zombies, and a huge explosion. In other words, they utterly ruined it. Thankfully, the DVD release rectifies this somewhat with the original ending, but it doesn't alter the fact that the ending that they originally released was painfully by the numbers. Number 5, Alien 3. Alien 3 is one of those rare movies that is pretty much universally despised. Even David Fincher has disowned it, and it's his directorial debut. Following the success of Aliens, 20th Century Fox were naturally eager to make a third film, and all manner of scripts began to circulate the office. William Gibson gave it a go, as did David Tuahi, who eventually made his own air quotes version as Pitch Black. A third treatment by Vincent Ward did the rounds, featuring Ripley and the alien, ending up on a monastery-like satellite entirely populated by space monks. Okay. Eventually, the final script combined Tuahi's idea of a prison planet with Ward's idea of monks, giving us prison monks. In other words, it was a complete fucking mess. Fincher was forced to constantly adjust the script throughout filming, tirelessly altering scenes to use sets that have already been built, all the while suffering constant studio interference. Once it was in the can, the producers dismantled the rough cut and built their own. It was an utterly miserable experience for all involved, particularly poor Fincher, who later claimed that he'd rather die of colon cancer than go through something like that again. Number 4, X-Men: The Last Stand. After the great success of X2, director Bryan Singer was raring to go on the next one, and had many grand plans, including an adaptation of the classic comic book story, The Dark Phoenix Saga. Unfortunately, 20th Century Fox had their own plans. Returns on their other superhero endeavors, Daredevil, Fantastic Four, and Elektra, had not been quite as strong as they'd hoped, and they got cold feet about a third X-Men movie. At the same time, Warner Brothers contacted Singer to see if he wanted to have a crack at finally reviving the Superman franchise. As a huge fan of the series, he jumped at the chance. It proved to be a double-edged sword, though. 20th Century Fox finally saw their arse and subsequently fired Singer for his air quotes betrayal. Ramping their pettiness up to 11, the studio announced that X-Men 3 would be a direct competitor with Superman Returns. Matthew Vaughn wisely dropped out of the project when he realised the rush schedule would create nothing but mashed shite, and so it proved, because as it stands, Last Stand is one of the worst X-Men films ever made. Number 3. The Godfather Part III. Francis Ford Coppola pretty much said that he'd concluded all he needed to by the end of Godfather Part II, but unfortunately financial necessity soon saw him change his mind. The director had a long-standing deal with Paramount for a third film and needed the cash, so he went ahead with it on the proviso that he'd be given 6 months to work out a script. He was given 6 weeks. Things became even more difficult when ideas were nixed because actor Robert Duvall refused to reprise his role. Apparently Al Pacino was set to earn 4 times as much as he was for equal billing. Without Hagen, Coppola needed a new story, so decided to focus on Michael's attempts to legitimize the business and his nephew's love affair with his daughter Mary. It could have worked too, were it not for one pesky last-minute change. Actress Winona Ryder dropped out due to illness, and Coppola's daughter Sophia was recast as Mary, putting in a performance so awful that the director was widely accused of nepotism. Behind the camera though, she's a fucking solid director, but just this? No. Number 2. Superman 2. 1978's Superman was a pretty groundbreaking film. It presented incredible effects for the time and starred the likes of heavyweight actors Marlon Brando and Gene Hackman. Unfortunately, the project soon became over budget, and frequent clashes between Donner and the producers plagued development on the film, so it was finally decided to focus just on the first film, even stealing parts from the would-be sequel to pad it out. Yet when the film released to great success, the producers resumed Superman 2, but not before replacing Donner with Richard Lester, who had basically served as his standby on the first effort. 75% of the sequel was already shot, but Hackman refused to return to film, so Lester had to fill the gaps somehow. The end result was a complete hodgepodge of styles, the realism of Donner's original shoots clashing with Lester's slapstick. Brando's scenes were cut to drop costs, and the two leads appear visibly different between scenes and sometimes within scenes. It's a rare example of a last-minute change to one movie completely ruining another. And number 1, Blade Runner. Ridley Scott's vision of Blade Runner is a neo-noir classic filled with stunning visuals, complex themes, and not to mention incredible performances. Harrison Ford, in one of his greatest turns as Blade Runner Rick Deckard, is tasked with hunting down a group of artificial humans known as replicants. Throughout the flick, it's subtly implied that Deckard himself might not actually be as human as he thinks, and the ambiguous ending only adds to the mystery. But once more, test audiences scuppered the show. Their negative reaction to the conclusion forced the studio to totally retool it. The subplot concerning Deckard as a replicant was entirely removed, and Ford was forced to record a voiceover explaining that Deckard's replicant lover Rachel wouldn't self-terminate, which is pretty fucking convenient, and then they all lived happily ever fucking after. In fact, the added final scene showing Ford driving through the mountains with his robo-squeeze wasn't even shot for Blade Runner. Instead, it was found on the cutting room floor for Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Since attaining cult status, about 9,000 different cuts of Blade Runner have been released, each of them a teensy bit better than the theatrical version. But one thing's for sure, the first version was a bit of a stinker at the end.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe below, and if you're looking for more content like this, then try a few things that are floating about around my ears. Might be fun. I can't promise it though, but it might be.